Leonardo da Vinci is often remembered as the painter behind the Mona Lisa, arguably the most famous smile in history. But that smile is only the surface of a much deeper story. Leonardo was not just an artist. He was a scientist, inventor, engineer, architect, anatomist, philosopher, and visionary. His mind defied the boundaries of his time, blending the precision of observation with the freedom of imagination. To understand Leonardo is to step into a life that was more than just a timeline of works. It was a relentless quest to see, to understand, and to create. In an age of candlelight and superstition, he dreamed of flight, dissected the human body with medical accuracy, and designed machines that wouldn't be built until centuries later. He lived in the 15th and early 16th centuries, yet his ideas feel as if they belonged to the world of tomorrow. This is not just a story about what Leonardo da Vinci did, it's a journey through how he saw the world. His life is not only a piece of history, it's a window into the potential of human curiosity. As you listen to the story unfold, let yourself slow down, breathe, and follow the quiet brilliance of a man who never stopped asking, why? 2. Early life and childhood, 1452 to 1466. Leonardo da Vinci was born on April 15, 1452, in the small Tuscan village of Vinci. There were no grand celebrations, no noble titles attached to his name, just the quiet birth of a boy who would one day change how humanity sees the world. He was born out of wedlock, the illegitimate son of Ser Piero da Vinci, a respected notary, and Caterina, a poor local woman, likely a maid or farmer's daughter. In 15th-century Italy, illegitimacy was a mark, limiting access to inheritance, education, and status. Leonardo grew up on the margins, neither fully accepted nor entirely cast out. This duality, one foot in the refined world of his father's household, the other in the earthy rhythms of the countryside, shaped him. In his father's world, there were legal documents, conversations about property, and the structure of society. In his mother's world, there was the scent of wet stone after rain, the sound of animals in the fields, and the textures of untouched nature. From the beginning, Leonardo was different. He didn't just look at the world, he studied it. A bird's wing wasn't just a thing of beauty to him, it was an engineering marvel. He would crouch for hours to observe how water curled around a stone or how a lizard's tail moved. He asked endless questions. Why is the sky blue? How do shadows shift? What makes a cat always land on its feet? The answers didn't matter as much as the questions themselves. Each one was a doorway into discovery. Leonardo had no access to elite education and never formally learned Latin, the language of science and scholarship. But instead of seeing that as a limitation, he turned to the best teacher he knew, the natural world. He learned by watching, sketching, and imagining. While other boys trained to be merchants or priests, Leonardo drew in the dirt with sticks and followed ants as they carried leaves. Nature became his first classroom, and his eyes, his first instruments. Even as a child, Leonardo wasn't merely present in the world, he was already trying to understand how it worked. 3. Apprenticeship in Florence, 1466 to 1476. At the age of 14, Leonardo's remarkable drawings caught the attention of his father, Ser Piero. Recognizing that his son's talent surpassed anything he could offer at home, Ser Piero brought the boy's sketches to one of Florence's most respected artists, Andrea del Verrocchio. Verrocchio was no ordinary painter, he was a sculptor, engineer, and master craftsman. His workshop was a hub of creativity and learning, where the Renaissance spirit of innovation was alive in every corner. Leonardo was accepted as an apprentice, and with that, the boy from Vinci stepped into a world of endless possibility. But it wasn't glamour or genius at first. His early tasks were humble, grinding pigments, preparing canvases, mixing plaster, and cleaning brushes. He studied drapery, anatomy, perspective, and architecture. Every detail mattered. This discipline grounded him, and under Verrocchio's watchful eye, his raw talent began to evolve into true mastery. While other apprentices mimicked, Leonardo absorbed. He wasn't just learning how to paint, he was learning how to see. Every muscle, every fold of cloth, every beam of light had meaning to him. His brush didn't simply replicate reality, it captured emotion, energy, and tension. One day, Verrocchio was working on a painting titled The Baptism of Christ. He assigned Leonardo to paint one of the angels. When the piece was finished, legend has it that Leonardo's angel was so graceful, so alive, that Verrocchio was stunned, and never painted again. Whether that tale is true or not, one fact remains: Leonardo was no longer just a student. He was becoming a force of his own. In Verrocchio's studio, Leonardo's talents flourished. His deep understanding of light, form, and movement was already beginning to surpass the technical. He studied the way a wrist twisted, the muscles of a horse, the grief in a mother's eyes. His art wasn't bound by rules, he questioned everything. Why did shadows blur at the edges? How could emotion be captured in a gesture? What made a smile feel alive? Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance, gave him the tools. But it was Leonardo's mind, restless, questioning, and profoundly observant, that transformed those tools into something timeless. 4. Early artistic career, 1476 to 1482. By the time Leonardo left Verrocchio's workshop in his early 20s, he was already considered a rising talent in Florence. His name began to circulate quietly, spoken with admiration by fellow artists, mentioned with curiosity by patrons. He started receiving commissions for altarpieces, portraits, and sketches for churches. Yet, even as opportunities grew, a curious pattern emerged: Leonardo often left his works unfinished. To some, it appeared as laziness or unpredictability. But to those who understood him, it was something else entirely: obsession. Leonardo would begin a painting with passion and intensity, but as soon as his curiosity drifted elsewhere, he could not force himself to continue. He wasn't driven by deadlines or fame. He was searching for something deeper than applause, a sense of perfection, of truth. If he could not achieve it, he simply moved on. What he did complete during this period, however, was unlike anything seen before. His command of chiaroscuro, the dramatic interplay of light and shadow, added emotional depth and lifelike presence to his figures. His portraits weren't just representations, they felt alive. Observers would later say that his paintings seemed to breathe, to think, to feel. Florence itself was a crucible of genius. Artists like Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, and Pollaiuolo filled the city with color and brilliance, and a young Michelangelo was beginning to rise. But Leonardo wasn't focused on rivalry. He wasn't painting to compete, he was painting to explore. Rather than confine himself to the studio, he wandered through markets, along the Arno River, into the hills outside the city. He observed the flow of water, the tilt of a smile, the weight of a human gesture. To Leonardo, every detail in the world was a lesson waiting to be learned. He was an artist, yes, but more than that, he was a student of everything. And as Florence shaped him, challenged him, and inspired him, it became clear that his mind was outgrowing even the city itself. The Milan years, inventor and engineer, 1482 to 1499. In the early 1480s, Leonardo da Vinci made a bold decision: he left the artistic heart of Florence and traveled north to Milan. For most, it would have been a step away from fame. But for Leonardo, it was a step toward transformation. Milan, under the rule of Duke Ludovico Sforza, was a city of ambition, engineering, and military power. Leonardo didn't arrive as a painter seeking commissions. Instead, he presented the Duke with a letter, a remarkable job application in which he barely mentioned his skills with a brush. Instead, he described himself as a military engineer, capable of designing bridges, cannons, armored vehicles, siege engines, and irrigation systems. Only at the very end did he mention, almost as an afterthought, that he could also paint. This wasn't false humility, it was strategy. Leonardo understood Milan. It was a city that valued utility over beauty, machines over masterpieces. To gain favor, he had to speak its language, and it worked. The Duke accepted him, and Leonardo began a new chapter as more than just an artist. He became a court engineer, designer, and visionary. In Milan, Leonardo's notebooks exploded with invention. He sketched machines of war, giant crossbows, armored tanks, rotating cannons. Some of his designs were practical, others impossibly complex for the materials of his time. But that wasn't the point. Leonardo wasn't just building devices, he was building the future. And yet, there was a profound contradiction at the heart of his work. Leonardo despised violence. He wrote of war's cruelty and devastation, and many scholars believe he designed war machines as a means to survive, not to be used. Others think he used military commissions to explore physics and force under the guise of engineering. Either way, while he dreamed of destruction on paper, his notebooks remained filled with studies of nature, flowers, birds, anatomy, geometry. His curiosity was never confined. While serving the Duke, he organized court festivals, designed costumes, advised on architecture, and painted. And it was here, in the refectory of a Milanese convent, that he began work on what would become one of his greatest masterpieces, The Last Supper. The Milan years marked a turning point. Florence had made Leonardo an artist. Milan pushed him to become an inventor, an engineer, and a thinker without boundaries. In Milan, he began not only to observe the world, but to imagine how it might be rebuilt. 6. The Last Supper, Art Meets Psychology, 1495 to 1498. In the heart of Milan, inside the quiet dining hall of the convent of Santa Maria del Grazie, Leonardo da Vinci undertook one of the most ambitious projects of his career, The Last Supper. Commissioned by Duke Ludovico Sforza, the mural was meant to adorn the refectory wall where Dominican monks ate their meals. But for Leonardo, it was far more than a religious commission, it was a psychological puzzle, a moment frozen at the brink of betrayal, and a canvas for human emotion. Rather than depict the moment with static, posed figures as many artists had done before, Leonardo chose to illustrate the precise instant when Jesus reveals, "One of you will betray me." The room erupts. Each apostle reacts with a unique expression: shock, denial, anger, sadness, guilt. You can almost hear the scrape of chairs, the clatter of dishes, the collective breath drawn in disbelief. At the center of it all is Jesus, calm, composed, a triangle of balance amid the storm. And then there is Judas, not isolated or cast in shadow, but seated among the others, recoiling, his hand subtly reaching toward a bag of silver. A spilled salt shaker lies near his elbow, a quiet symbol of bad luck and betrayal. Every detail in the painting is deliberate, the light falling through the windows, the alignment of gestures, the psychological tension radiating outward from Christ. It was a moment of theology, turned into theater, alive, dynamic, painfully human. And yet, ever the experimenter, Leonardo rejected the traditional fresco technique. Instead of painting onto wet plaster, which dries quickly and limits detail, he painted on a dry wall to allow for finer texture and richer depth. The result was stunning, but fragile. Over time, the paint began to flake. Humidity, pollution, and even war nearly destroyed it. What survives today is a heavily restored fragment of its original glory. Still, despite the damage, The Last Supper continues to captivate. It isn't just a painting, it's a window into Leonardo's mind, a place where art meets science, light meets psychology, and a single glance can tell a story more powerful than any sermon. This masterpiece was not only a triumph of technique but also a revolution in how art could reflect life, not as static perfection, but as fleeting, fragile truth. 7. Anatomical Studies and Scientific Inquiry, 1500 to 1510. After completing The Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci's obsession with understanding the human body deepened beyond art. He no longer wanted to merely capture how people looked, he wanted to uncover how they worked. What moved a hand? What made a smile possible? What secrets lay beneath the skin? To answer these questions, Leonardo turned to a practice that was both illegal and dangerous at the time: human dissection. In candlelit morgues and hospitals, often alone and in secret, he studied dozens of corpses, men, women, children, and even animals. Every cut was a quiet act of rebellion against the limits of accepted knowledge, and every sketch he made was a revelation. His anatomical drawings were not only artistically beautiful but scientifically precise, so precise, in fact, that modern doctors would later confirm their accuracy centuries after they were made. He documented the muscles of the neck, the valves of the heart, the expansion of the lungs, and the curvature of the spine. One sketch showed a fetus curled inside a womb, rendered with such tenderness and detail it felt more like a tribute to life than a clinical diagram. Leonardo didn't just draw, he explained. He wrote notes beside his illustrations, often in mirror writing, as if protecting his discoveries. He theorized about blood circulation long before the science had a name for it. He observed and recorded truths about human physiology that would not become mainstream medical knowledge until the 20th century. Yet despite the brilliance of his findings, Leonardo never published them. His notebooks, over 7,000 pages in total, remained private, scattered, and unread. Perhaps he feared backlash from the church. Perhaps he felt his work was unfinished. Or maybe, just maybe, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to understand. To Leonardo, the human body wasn't just a machine, it was a universe. A structure of divine design, where flesh met spirit, and every tendon held a secret. He painted the body with beauty, but he studied it with truth. And in doing so, he became not just the greatest artist of his time, but one of the first great anatomists in human history. 8. Flight and futuristic inventions. Among all of Leonardo da Vinci's obsessions, none captured his imagination quite like the mystery of flight. To him, flying wasn't just about mechanics, it was the ultimate symbol of freedom. For hours, sometimes days, he watched birds in motion, hawks gliding silently, swallows darting through the air. He even purchased birds from markets just to release them, studying how they took off and soared into the sky. He filled page after page of his notebooks with flying machines, flapping wings, gliders, parachutes, and spinning aerial screws that resemble modern helicopters. Some were inspired by bats and birds, others entirely original. He envisioned a parachute with a pointed canopy, a flying device powered by pedals and pulleys, and even robotic wings that mimicked the anatomy of real flight. None of these machines ever flew during Leonardo's lifetime. The technology and materials of the 15th century were not yet advanced enough to realize his visions. But the ideas? The ideas were sound. In modern times, engineers who have reconstructed his designs found that many of them actually work. Leonardo's understanding of aerodynamics came not from textbooks but from pure observation. He studied how feathers flexed in wind, how birds adjusted weight midair, how airflow curved around a wing. He believed that flight wasn't magic, it was science. If nature could do it, so could man. And yet, his perfectionism often held him back. He would abandon building a prototype because the version in his mind was always better than what his hands could create. Still, he never gave up. Flight was a question he returned to again and again throughout his life, even as he moved on to anatomy, architecture, or painting. He never let go of the sky. Centuries later, his dreams would become real. His parachute was successfully tested. His wing studies informed the principles of modern aviation. His flying machines, once dismissed as fantasies, are now viewed as visions ahead of their time. Leonardo never left the ground. But he gave the world wings. And in doing so, he proved a powerful truth, that imagination, rooted in careful observation, can transcend even the heaviest of limitations. 9. Mona Lisa, The Art of Subtlety, 1503 to 1519. Around the year 1503, after returning to Florence from Milan, Leonardo da Vinci began work on what would become the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa. At first glance, it is a simple portrait, a woman seated calmly, hands folded, eyes meeting yours. But there is something else. A mystery lingers in her expression. A smile that seems to shift, a gaze that follows you, a presence that feels almost alive. Her real name was Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant. But to the world, she became Mona Lisa. And Leonardo approached her portrait not as a task to be completed, but as a lifelong meditation. He worked on it slowly, over years, layering thin glazes of oil to build depth and softness. He used a groundbreaking technique known as sfumato, where colors and edges blend seamlessly, mimicking how the human eye perceives reality. There are no harsh lines in the Mona Lisa, only transitions, like a dream unfolding. Behind her is a surreal landscape of winding rivers, misty mountains, and a sky that seems to exist outside of time. But the heart of the painting is her smile, so subtle, so elusive, it defies explanation. Step back, and it's warm and inviting. Step closer, and it seems to vanish. Is she joyful? Is she hiding something? Is she smiling at a secret, or at you? Leonardo never delivered the portrait to its commissioner. Instead, he kept it with him for the rest of his life, tweaking it, studying it, carrying it from city to city. Perhaps it became more than a painting. Perhaps it became a reflection of himself, his obsession with light, form, emotion, and mystery. More than 500 years later, the Mona Lisa still mesmerizes. Not because of her clothing or the setting, but because of what she withholds. Her smile doesn't speak, it listens. It invites you into a silent conversation. And that was Leonardo's genius, to paint not just a face, but a feeling, not a person, but a presence. In her smile lives all of his brilliance, the precision of science, the sensitivity of art, the depth of philosophy. He didn't just paint the Mona Lisa. He gave the world an eternal question. And perhaps, somewhere, Leonardo is still smiling too, knowing we're all still searching for the answer. 10. Restlessness and intellectual pursuits. Despite Leonardo da Vinci's growing fame and the global reverence his paintings would one day receive, he was never one to remain still. His success didn't anchor him, it stirred him. By the early 1500s, he had returned to Florence, then left again, then returned once more. Cities changed. Patrons changed. But one thing remained constant, Leonardo kept moving. He wasn't chasing wealth, titles, or recognition. He was chasing something far more elusive, understanding. In Florence, he received a major commission, a vast mural depicting the Battle of Anghiari, a chaotic, muscular swirl of warriors and horses. It was meant to be his greatest fresco, a triumphant return to large-scale public art. But once again, Leonardo's perfectionism and experimental methods interfered. The paint didn't dry properly. The complexity overwhelmed the medium. He abandoned the project, leaving behind only rough sketches and fragments. Some say he feared that the final work could never match the image in his mind. Others believe he simply lost interest the moment the mystery had been solved. But it wasn't failure. It was Leonardo being Leonardo, a restless seeker whose curiosity had no finish line. To many around him, this unpredictability made him frustrating. Unreliable. Difficult. But to Leonardo, it was natural. He didn't divide life into disciplines or duties. Everything was connected. Art, anatomy, mechanics, nature, it all flowed together in one invisible thread. He dissected bodies by candlelight. He designed canals and urban infrastructure. He studied the geometry of leaves and the mathematics of motion. One day he would sketch flying machines, the next he would measure the proportions of the human skull. He wasn't distracted, he was weaving the fabric of knowledge itself. Still, this constant movement made it difficult to maintain steady patronage. Eventually, he left Florence and traveled to Rome. There, Michelangelo and Raphael were thriving under papal commissions, dominating the art scene with bold works and grand spectacles. But Leonardo, now older, quieter, more introspective, did not fit in. He wasn't driven by drama or acclaim. He was still the same curious boy from Vinci, now searching for the universal patterns that bound everything together. Leonardo da Vinci was not a man with one profession. He was a mind in motion. Always listening. Always observing. Always reaching for the next question. 11. Final years in France, 1516 to 1519. By 1516, Leonardo da Vinci's time in Italy was quietly coming to a close. He was now in his 60s, a venerable age for the 16th century. His fame was widespread, but his body was failing. A likely stroke had weakened his right side, making it difficult for him to paint as he once had. The man who had captured the subtle smile of the Mona Lisa now struggled to hold a brush. And yet, the world still wanted him. That same year, King Francis I of France extended a generous invitation. A young, enlightened monarch with a deep admiration for art and science, Francis saw in Leonardo not just an artist, but a living treasure, a symbol of Renaissance brilliance. He offered Leonardo a beautiful manor home in the Loire Valley, a pension, and, most importantly, complete freedom to pursue whatever he wished, with no deadlines and no expectations. Leonardo accepted. He crossed the Alps one final time, accompanied by his trusted assistant Francesco Melzi and likely also Salai, his longtime pupil and companion. With him, he brought his notebooks, his sketches, and several unfinished works, including the Mona Lisa, which he had carried with him for over a decade. He settled at Clos-Luz, a charming residence just steps from the king's Château d'Amboise. There, in the gardens and quiet rooms of the manor, Leonardo found something he had rarely known: peace. He spent his days walking, teaching, thinking, and sketching. He designed architectural plans, hydraulic systems, and even conceptualized dreamlike palaces that blended nature and geometry. Though his body was failing, his mind remained sharp. He continued to return to his favorite questions, about movement, balance, the design of nature. He wasn't working for patrons now, he was working for truth, for joy, for himself. King Francis I often visited Leonardo, not as a superior, but as a friend. They walked together, spoke of art, philosophy, and invention. The king called Leonardo the greatest man who ever lived. It wasn't a palace Leonardo needed, it was understanding. And in France, perhaps for the first time, he felt fully seen. It is poetic that a man born out of wedlock, denied formal education, and misunderstood for much of his life would spend his final years cherished by royalty. He had once painted smiles. Now, at last, he had found his own. 12. Death and Legacy. On May 2, 1519, in the quiet manor of Clos-Luz in the Loire Valley of France, Leonardo da Vinci took his final breath. He was 67 years old. His body, once tireless and precise, had grown frail. His right hand, once capable of capturing the most delicate expressions, could no longer paint. But his mind remained vibrant until the end, curious, reflective, and deeply awake. He did not die surrounded by crowds or grandeur. There were no grand public tributes. Instead, he passed in the presence of a few trusted companions, most notably Francesco Melzi, his student, assistant, and perhaps the person who knew Leonardo best. Melzi had become more than a scribe, he was Leonardo's intellectual heir, the keeper of his notebooks, and the quiet guardian of his legacy. In his final days, Leonardo wrote his will with care. He left money to his servants, to the poor, and to Salai, his longtime companion whose presence had shaped much of Leonardo's middle years. He entrusted his life's work, his drawings, manuscripts, and scientific observations, to Melzi, knowing that these pages held more value than gold. There is a romantic legend, unconfirmed, but often told, that King Francis I visited Leonardo on his deathbed and held him in his arms as he died. Whether true or not, it speaks to the respect Leonardo commanded from one of the most powerful rulers of Europe. Leonardo was buried in the chapel of Saint Hubert near the Château d'Amboise. His grave is modest, even hidden, easily overlooked. But his legacy could never be buried. He had no children, no biological heirs, but what he left behind was far more enduring, a universe of ideas, questions, and visions that would echo across the centuries. And yet, in the years after his death, much of that legacy was nearly lost. His notebooks, entrusted to Melzi, were scattered, some sold, some given away, others misplaced. For centuries, Leonardo was remembered mostly as a painter, the man behind the Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. His work in anatomy, engineering, geology, optics, and flight remained hidden in forgotten drawers and private collections. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that scholars began to rediscover the full scope of his genius. Slowly, page by page, they pieced together his thoughts. They realized that this was not just a great painter, but a man who had thought centuries ahead of his time. Today, Leonardo da Vinci is remembered not just for what he created, but for how he saw. His legacy is not confined to museums or textbooks, it lives in the spirit of discovery itself. He did not fear death. As he once wrote, just as a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so a life well-used brings happy death. And Leonardo da Vinci's life was more than well-used, it was extraordinary. 13. Rediscovery and impact. For centuries after Leonardo da Vinci's death, the true breadth of his genius lay dormant, hidden in dusty drawers, scattered across Europe, and split among collectors who often didn't understand what they were holding. His most valuable possessions, his notebooks, filled with drawings, observations, and questions, were fragmented, mislabeled, and in some cases, lost entirely. To the world, Leonardo remained simply the painter of the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. His reputation was vast, but incomplete. People praised his artistry without knowing the mind behind it, an inventor who imagined flying machines 400 years before the Wright brothers, an anatomist whose drawings predated modern medical understanding, a scientist who saw patterns in light, water, and nature that the world wouldn't formally recognize for centuries. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that historians and scientists began to rediscover and piece together the thousands of pages he left behind. What they found stunned the world. Here was a man who had sketched helicopters and tanks before such things had names. A man who had theorized blood circulation before William Harvey, described solar energy and optics, and designed mechanical devices that anticipated automation. His insights into hydraulics, geology, anatomy, and physics were not only decades, but centuries ahead of their time. And the most astonishing part? He had never published any of it. He didn't present to universities, didn't form a school, didn't seek titles or prestige. His greatest ideas slept silently for generations. Yet when those ideas finally resurfaced, they transformed Leonardo from an artistic master into something more, a universal genius. A man who not only painted with unmatched grace, but thought in dimensions his time could not yet comprehend. Today, many of Leonardo's manuscripts are preserved in museums and libraries across the world. Engineers still study his designs. Doctors reference his anatomical sketches. Artists are inspired by his balance of science and emotion. His notebooks are now viewed as some of the most extraordinary documents in human history. And even now, the rediscovery is not complete. Scholars believe there are still missing pages, undiscovered thoughts, lost machines, unasked questions waiting in attics, vaults, or private collections. There's a quiet irony in it all. Leonardo da Vinci, the man who wanted to understand everything, almost had his own legacy lost to time. But as history caught up with him, the world began to see what he truly was, not a figure of the past, but a mind from the future. 14. Timeless genius. Leonardo da Vinci lived in the 15th and early 16th centuries, an age of candlelight, parchment, and superstition. And yet, his mind operated as if it belonged to a future that hadn't arrived yet. He envisioned machines the world had no materials to build. He described natural systems for which no scientific language yet existed. While others still clung to myth, Leonardo was drawing blueprints, of helicopters, contact lenses, underwater diving suits, and solar-powered devices. He mapped the human heart with anatomical precision and theorized blood circulation centuries before it would be formally taught. In his notebooks, he laid the foundation for fields we now call aerodynamics, robotics, geology, and optics, all without formal training, university degrees, or institutional support. And what's more astonishing, he never published any of it. Why? Perhaps because the world wasn't ready. Or maybe because Leonardo didn't care about recognition, he cared about the pursuit of truth. For him, the knowing was the reward. Today, we marvel at his foresight. Engineers reconstruct his machines, and they work. Scientists verify his anatomical observations, and they hold up. But Leonardo didn't just want to build or explain, he wanted to connect. To him, the universe wasn't divided between science and art, reason and feeling. It was one vast, intricate masterpiece, and he was trying to understand every stroke. And yet, behind all this brilliance was a human being. A man with doubts, distractions, and unfinished dreams. A man whose genius wasn't linear, but restless, scattered, and breathtakingly vast. His legacy isn't just in what he created, it's in how he thought. Slowly. Deeply. Without rushing toward an answer. In an age that demands speed, Leonardo reminds us of the power of stillness, of looking longer, asking better questions, and seeing connections others miss. Leonardo da Vinci was not only ahead of his time. He transcended it. And because of that, he remains with us, not as a relic, but as a compass for creativity, curiosity, and what it means to be fully human. 15. Unified mind, art plus science. In a world that often divides knowledge into categories, science, art, engineering, philosophy, Leonardo da Vinci lived as if those boundaries didn't exist. To him, there was no conflict between logic and beauty, between a compass and a brush. He believed they were simply different tools for seeking the same thing, truth. Leonardo painted with the precision of a scientist and studied science with the wonder of an artist. When he painted a smile, he had studied the muscles beneath it. When he designed a machine, he had observed how birds soared and water flowed. To him, art was mathematics in motion, and science was poetry in structure. His famous drawing, the Vitruvian Man, is the perfect symbol of this unity, a human figure inscribed in a circle and square, expressing perfect proportions and cosmic harmony. It wasn't just a sketch. It was a manifesto, the human body as a bridge between art and geometry, between nature and design. In the Last Supper, he used mathematical perspective to lead the eye toward Christ, blending emotional drama with visual precision. In the Mona Lisa, he applied optical illusions and subtle shadowing, techniques rooted in his study of vision and light. Every line, every angle, every brushstroke was infused with observation and purpose. To Leonardo, the universe was not a puzzle to be solved in pieces. It was a masterpiece to be understood as a whole. He didn't ask, is this art or science? He asked, how does it work, and how can I express it more truthfully? This integration, this holistic thinking, is what made him so powerful, so rare. In today's world, where specializations are often kept apart, Leonardo reminds us of what is possible when we think across boundaries, when we let wonder guide our reason and let reason sharpen our wonder. His genius wasn't in choosing between two worlds, it was in showing us they were always one.